home run at Citi Field. Citi has donated $2,000 to No Kid Hungry. While we anxiously await more Mets home runs at Citi Field, Citi and the Citi Foundation have continued to support No Kid Hungry, providing $7 million in support since March. New estimates show that 1 in 4 children in the U.S. could face hunger this year because of the coronavirus. Now more than ever, we ask you to join Citi in the fight against childhood hunger. To donate, visit www.nokidhungry.org/Citi. And with that, boys, we are underway. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Steve?
I'm good. You ready to elevate it a little bit now? You ready to bring it? Because we're gonna have to this week.
I mean, between the four of us, we have to account for 53 home runs.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not quite sure I can carry my share.
Don't look for me. Don't look for any help from me.
Ronnie once hit home runs in back-to-back starts, right?
I think
that's a rare feat.
Between Keith and I, we might get to 25. Gary, do you have
I might get I might have a one cologne swing in me. That's about it.
Yeah.
Guys, don't worry. I've got 30 or so in me. Don't worry.
Oh, nice, nice, great.
Let's start. Unfortunately, we're going to start where we've had to start now for a few weeks. We'd love to just sit here and talk about the return of baseball right now. The negotiations still ongoing, though. So, Gary, as we stand right now, what do you make of the current situation?
50 games, 82 games, 114 games. I mean, the folks who follow these things closely, you hear great optimism, you hear great pessimism, you're figuring that everybody's just posturing, knowing that there's a midpoint where they're going to meet, but it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know exactly what the drop dead date is. I mean, the owners are talking about the possibility of a 50-game season. I can't believe that's where it's going to end up. If it is a 50-game season, that gives them more time to figure it out. But if they want to play, the 82 games that they initially proposed, which I think is probably the best that they could hope for, they got to get this done soon because, spring training, you need at least two and a half weeks at the absolute minimum. And, here we are already in the first week of June. They want to be playing a month from today. They need to hustle and get this thing done.
Hey, Keith, let me ask you a question. You played half a season in 81. Right. Did that feel like a full season for you? Did it feel legit?
What did we play that year? How did we played over
100 something?
Games, I believe. Yeah. Was cut into 2 halves and a big break in the middle, obviously. I did not work out. Now, the big difference that I have seen, and it didn't feel like a season really, Ronnie, but a full season to answer your question. But I do remember one thing, that Marvin Miller was our main guy back then, the head of the union, and he told us, work out if you want. I go, but try not to work out publicly. So you're reading in the papers now where they're opening up camps. And so the players are going to camps and working out. I think that if Marvin had been in control, it would have been work out on your own, continue to work out on your own, do not use the camps, get the owners back at the table. They've come back with a hard stance, no counter proposal. They've dug their heels in. You got to get them back in to negotiate here. And let's just, the players would send a real strong signal if they weren't working out, because, and I'm remembering what Marvin said, they're not going to be ready to play. And the clock keeps ticking. And the purpose was to get the 2 guys at the table and then hash out a deal.
Keith, it's interesting you say that, because I remember in 1990, I believe that was the year, where a lot of the players were down in spring training, but you could not go to, we were told not to go to the ballpark. So I remember we ended up playing 2-hour pickup basketball games every day.
Yeah.
And I know that the powers that be were going nuts with the threat of injury, that we were staying in shape, not baseball shape, but in shape by playing 2 hours of basketball a day. And that scared them a little.
The problem we have right now is the problem of leverage, because if you take the owners at their word, and you can choose to do that or not. They will tell you that they will lose money with every regular season game that's played, which is why it's to their benefit to play as few regular season games as possible, pay the players as little as possible, but still get their postseason when they make all their money. So there's almost a strange disincentive for them to settle quickly, and I'm sure that's got to play into the dynamic right now. If you take them at their word that they're going to lose money with every regular season game played. So, for the players to come back and say 114 games and then the owners say 50 games, it kind of gives you an idea where everything is. The fact of the matter is, though, that the game is best off if it's played and as long a season as possible is played. And while it might not redound to the owners at the moment, certainly over the long term, health of the game, value of franchises, they're better off playing more rather than less.
You don't want another 1994 where the fans were really, really soured. And don't think a lot of pressure comes to bear on the players, and the owners are very good at that. I'm speaking, I'm showing my bias here a little bit from my past history and experiences. There's just as much pressure on the owners too. The owners don't have to go out there and play and don't get the brunt of fans' anger and frustration, but they're in a business here too. And Gary said the magic word, and Ronnie and I had a conversation this morning, postseason. Why do they want more teams in the postseason? That's an extra bracket or two. That's more money where they can recoup. So owners, if there's no season, nobody wins. Period. End of story. Everybody loses, and you're taking an enormous risk with your fan base.
Ron, Keith, you guys were talking about spring training, getting ready for a season if it ultimately does take place. And obviously, as Keith was pointing out, it's very different than it was back when you played in terms of how these players keep in shape. So given the fact that a lot of these facilities are open, that players have been keeping in shape, how long legitimately of a spring training period do you think the players would need? And is it different for, say, a pitcher versus a position player?
Take it, Ron.
Well, I think first, Steve, we can't make the assumption that the players are in shape. If you told me it's the regular season, I would say yes, they're in shape. They're in better shape now than they ever were when we played the game. But you can't assume right now that the player is in shape. We don't know what kind of facilities they had. Baseball's not the kind of sport where you can kind of throw the ball up against the wall. You need some help, and everyone's been distancing. So really the evaluation of your talent, if you do come back and play, and who's in shape, who's not in shape, is going to be one of the most important things for a team to do. That being said, let's say everyone is in fairly good shape. Pitchers are the most important. Sorry, Keith.
No,
and I think that you do need the 3 weeks. If you just do the math of having him throw the innings, the every other day, adding 2 innings, 3 innings, 5, getting them up to 90 pitches, which will be the key with the expanded rosters, is going to take you 3 weeks. So I think that's the key. I think the hitters, they would love to get X amount of at-bats. You can get those in 10 days or 3 weeks. I think it's the problem I see there, and I don't know if Keith agrees, is that taking everyday players and trying to ramp up the workload in such a short amount of time, do they get injured?
Well, the pitchers, to me, Ronnie can speak to that, but it just seems pretty, basic to me that they need to throw, and they need to have if Ronnie says 3 weeks, and that's 4 starts. I would think 4 starts to stretch them out, no matter what they're doing on the side here, since there's been no baseball. As far as a hitter, as you're taking BP, I think it's easier for the hitter as long as you take BP on a regular basis and you have your timing. So you come in, you're not going to need much time. I think the hitters will be ready much quicker. The thing that worries me is they're going to be coming back July, August, which are the notorious dog days. You're going to be hot weather. And one thing about baseball, Michael Jordan said when he started playing, he had a different idea of more respect for baseball players, because he thought we just stood around. But I know that when I was in my prime and I was running in the off season religiously and came to spring training in shape, when those spring training games started and that heat down here in spring, which is not the heat of July and August up north, I was exhausted. It took a while to build up stamina to play on and off the field 9 innings. So that they're going to probably need some time playing. So I'm sure that they'll be ready to go, but they're going to need time, and they're going to get it because the pitchers need it more than them.
There are a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One is that the likelihood is we're going to have 30-man rosters with 20-man taxi squads, which means just on the active roster alone, you're going to have probably 16 pitchers. And then you're going to have another 7 or 8 pitchers, maybe 10 more pitchers on the taxi squad. So I don't think there's going to be any expectation when the season begins that starters are going to be going even 6 innings. The expectation may be the starters begin the season going 4 or 5 innings, and then you have enormous numbers of relief pitchers to pick up the slack. The other thing that I'm interested in from a player's standpoint, especially if we have the really short season, like a 50-game season. You know, we talk all the time about the marathon versus the sprint, but now the baseball season becomes a sprint. And I'm wondering whether it changes the nature of the way the games are played mentally. I mean, you've got that when you're in the postseason or even in a pennant race, you've got that extra level of investment. And I'm wondering whether you see that from day one and whether there's an impact because of that, because of the maybe lack of preparation for the season in terms of the way intensity meets injury. Kind of like what we've seen when they've played the WBC in recent years, that you've got guys playing intense games before they're really ready. So I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
Yeah, and they end up with injuries, Gary, sometimes. I think what is going to happen, to me personally, I think that each manager is going to manage today like it's the 7th game of the World Series. I think that you're not going to have any kick away games. You know, we've watched enough baseball where, you know, you're down 7-0, and instead of trying to take a shot, you go, hey, this is the day I got to rest my guys and get them ready for tomorrow or whatever. Every day is another checked day on the calendar. And I just don't think as a manager of a ball club, you can afford to take a day off. I think you're just every game is going to be managed to the max, and whatever happens, we'll reevaluate, especially with the taxi squads, what we're going to do after the game.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be having, like when Sandy Alderson was here, it was like, no matter how hot the hitter was, or he had played 10 games in a row and that's his off day, he's got to take an off day. He's got 10 games in a row. That's not going to happen. Now, managers are going to be in uncharted territory. I mean, are you going to run your player out there 50, 60 games in a row? You're going to probably want to sit them down. So I think early in the season, I think you're going to see guys getting maybe some rest, maybe once a week as they build up their stamina. That then they'll be able to go to the whip. Another thing that concerns me, and Gary mentioned with the expanded rosters, who are these guys? They're AAA players.
Yeah,
the league's going to be diluted. It's going to be a diluted product if injuries amass on the field.
And then imagine if you start out 5-12 instead of 12-5. That's going to change the way you manage
sure.
also.
Well, sure. I mean, think about this. Last year's world champions in a 50-game season would have been 19-31.
That's right.
That was the Nationals record after 50 games. So is 50 games a good proving ground for a season? You can certainly make the case that it's not, but you can also make the case that when you have that shorter schedule, and you know, if you're a college team, if you're playing in winter ball, you know, you've played with shorter schedules, and I think it definitely lends a little extra intensity to every day. Ronnie talked about the way the managers handle it, but I have to think, Keith, that from a player's standpoint, that each at bat becomes more critical as well, and guys aren't going to throw away at bats quite as often as they might normally.
I don't think it's in terms they both go together. I mean, I think every game's important, so then every at bat's important. They're wed. So there's, the RBI game winning situation is, a game 10 in the season, game 5 in the season is like a stretch run. It's like getting in the middle of August and you got 6 weeks to go of the season. This is when you go to the whip. Ron, did I bore you?
There's no cough button on Facebook Live.
You good?
Right.
I'm there. I'm here. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I still have
as long as you're still with us.
I still have some coughing issue, guys. You guys know more about that than me.
So I actually want to go back to the point Ron brought up, though, about the managers. The Mets have a first-time major league manager, at least, in Luis Rojas. So this adds another layer for him to what he's going to have to deal with. Does a shorter season make his job harder or easier first go around?
I think it works both ways, right? Because obviously the learning curve that any first year manager is going to have, he doesn't have as many games to get into that learning curve. So that's the negative. But the positive is, and I mentioned it before, winter ball. He managed for years in winter ball where you play a short schedule, where the pressure is intense and every game matters. And also you have rolling rosters over the course of that winter ball season. And I think you're going to have that as well. So a lot of the elements that might come into play in a shortened season, Luis has already been down that path, and that might play in his favor.
I think the hardest thing for Luis or anyone else who's going to be managing this year is how you go to the whip with your players from day one. There's not going to be any kind of bounce pass into the season for a layup. It's going to be all hands on deck, and here we go. I was thinking to myself, if I were managing a team, I might go ask a Navy SEAL guy, how do they get ready in the shortest amount of time to go do something very serious? Like to talk to my team about how they prepare mentally, especially to be ready to do something so quickly in a short amount of time, which these players are going to be doing. It's going to be interesting to watch from our seat, wherever that seat is. By the way.
It's going to be a tender balance. You still have to approach the game that the game of the day is the most important game of the season. You can't look ahead. You're just going to get quicker to where it starts counting. You're going to get there faster right from the get-go, but you still have to, you got to take it a day at a time. And I know it's an old cliche, but it's true. You can't look ahead.
I think one of the hard things for every manager, but particularly for a guy in his first year, is that normally a manager will take that first 40 games of the season, first quarter of the year, to figure stuff out, right? He's going to try out some different batting orders, see what his best lineup is, particularly if he's got a lot of moving parts, which Luis does. I mean, they've got lots of guys who can move around to different positions, but you really don't have that luxury. You've got to figure out really quickly what your best 8 is that you're going to go to war with. And, you're going to make changes as you go and give guys the days off, but not as many as you would in a 162 game season. So I think you need to solidify things a little faster, and that'll make it for every manager.
And I think for the players, and I don't know if you feel this way, Keith, I mentioned starting out 12-5 as opposed to 5-12. What happens if you're a hitter and you go through that slump that a lot of hitters might have in April, but you only have 25 games to make it up? I mean, that's got to wear on you mentally too if you're hitting a buck and change after the first 20 games.
But you got to think in terms of that when you have those little. Once you get to 300 at bats, you're pretty much stabilized.
Yeah, but now the season's going to be over.
Exactly. So you're going to have the opportunity, 3 for 4 when you got less than you got 100.
Let's make a big jump.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I got one. I got one for you, Keith. The guys who are the slow starters in April when it's cold, are they going to be the slow starters in July? or not.
This, Gary, and that's a very good point. And we don't know. This is not. This is we're in uncharted territories. We're like Captain Kirk here. We're going where no man's gone before.
To that end, though, Keith, talking about uncharted territory, the thing I'm curious about, and it may seem small, but to go back to the manager for a second, Luis Rojas, first-time major league manager, he's not going to have his bench coach right next to him this year, right? Bench coach going to be 6 feet away. Players that he wants to communicate with are going to be up in the stands, perhaps. Just that communication and being somewhat on an island, that's got to add a new wrinkle also.
Yeah, and the bullpen phone too. They're gonna have to wipe it down after getting the phone. You got to wipe it down. That's
Steve,
another thing you got to worry about.
Steve, I'll tell you this: in the ninth inning, they will be 1 feet away. They will not be 6 feet away, and it might help, honestly, for a new manager to have one helping voice as opposed to many chefs in the kitchen.
How about this? How about guys on the bench? Are they going to be required to wear masks? What's the protocol?
Yeah.
You got amount. You got these extra players.
I think everybody's wearing masks except for the guys who are actively participating in the game.
That's okay. Yeah. So that's
and us. We won't be wearing masks.
No, I'm going to have one around my neck because when I don't want to speak, I'm just going to pull it up.
Except we might be all three be in separate booths, so we might not be able to see each other. I won't know that you have the mask on.
That's so interesting.
I'll text you.
Stay away from my headset.
It's interesting that they don't ask you guys to wear masks.
You're not going to be able to crowd me anymore. No more crowding.
That's right.
They requested that I wear a mask because they said I'd look better. So I'm surprised that didn't happen with the three.
I want to know what you're going to be doing. Where are you going to be? Are they going to let you in your normal space in the photo box? Are you going to be out in the empty stands by yourself?
Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. I doubt I would be allowed right next to them, though. I mean, if they're not allowed within 6 feet of each other,
the players, I think some of the extra players are going to be in the stand.
That's what I'm saying.
Behind the dugout or next to the dugout where, near the photo box where you normally are.
You're going to do phantom interviews in the stands. You'll be like Marcel Marceau.
I'll interview one of the cardboard cutouts that they have, the fake fans in the stands.
That's right.
It'll be like the caveman interview.
That's right.
We've got a fan question about a topic that I think many fans are thinking about with the shortened season for the Mets this year, potential DH. How much of an impact, this is from Jason, do you think Cespedes will have this season? He says, and in the future for the Mets. I don't think anybody's thinking past this year, but let's talk about this year in particular, especially if there's a DH. What type of an impact could he have on this team?
Well, I mean, if you watched him taking batting practice in spring training, you had to be impressed with his bat speed and with, the way the ball was flying off his bat. I don't know how much of a factor Cespedes could have been without a DH, but certainly it's got a better chance to contribute with a DH because, that's his number one skill right now until he can prove that his legs are up to play in the outfield on a regular basis. So, the Mets have a lot of depth that they can use at the DH spot, but I think Cespedes starts out at the top of the list until he proves he can't do it.
Flip a coin, Steve. I mean, he could get out red hot. He's missed a lot of time. And Ron, do you feel that this? I know that as far as Conforto is concerned, it's helped Conforto. He would have missed a lot of time with the oblique. Now he can come right in. He's had plenty of time to heal that. But with Cespedes missing more time, I kind of tend to think that might work against him. I think he needs to get some playing time, some reps.
Yeah, I personally think this is the best case scenario that Cespedes could have ever had. This gives him a chance to not have to play tons of games. He's going to have a DH spot, so he doesn't have to play the field because we saw in spring training, we weren't sure if he was going to play the field. And anything is a step north of the virtual game, first one that we did where he had 4 punch outs. So he's only going to be better than that.
Since 2016, for each Mets home run at Citi Field, Citi has donated to No Kid Hungry. With more children facing hunger due to the coronavirus, Citi and the Citi Foundation have continued to support No Kid Hungry, providing $7 million in support since March. Join Citi in the fight against childhood hunger. Donate at www.nokidhungry.org/Citi. So, guys, I want to go back now to better times. And one of, if not the most fun game that we covered last season, August 9th, the Micahel Conforto walk-off, the Tood Frasier 3-run game-tying home run in the bottom of the 9th inning. You guys, with that ridiculously unique perspective for that home run, stationed out in left field. Just, I wanted to get your memories of that night now, almost a year later, Gary.
Well, it was special. I mean, the Mets were on such a roll going into that series, and, they had gone from having absolutely no chance to all of a sudden injecting themselves into the possibility of making a run for the postseason. And I think it really reached its apex that night. Remember, they came from behind twice in that game. They were down 3-0 early, and then Alonso and JD homered, and they tied it up. And then Rendon homered in the 7th, and I think the Nats added a run in the 9th, and Sean Doolittle comes in, and the Mets just racky-tacked him. I mean,
yeah.
And Frasier, I mean, that's as big a home run as the Mets had all season. And it was a unique perspective for us because we were just above the left field fence, and the ball went right down the left field line past the foul pole, and we had the best perspective on it. But I just remember, because of where we were sitting and because it became such an important game on the schedule, sitting there in fear all night, because it's really hard to call a game from that angle. And I was really fearful all night that I was going to mess something up because I couldn't really see what was going on. But fortunately, it never got completely out of hand. And also, that was the night that the jersey ripping started, when Conforto got the winning hit.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary. You would know this better than I. Wasn't that Conforto's first walk-off RBI, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, geez. So it was a magical night. Not only doing the game out there, but also Frasier's home run, Conforto's hit. You could see how happy Conforto was, and I think, I don't know. I think we might have talked about it the next day, but you got a real sense that night of community and what that team had as a team and how close they were. Listen, every team celebrates when they have a walk-off win, especially an important walk-off win. But for some reason, it was different. There was so much joy that I had not seen yet in the year, and all of that is stuff that builds in the clubhouse, of course, that you don't see. Steve, you might see it, but we don't.
Yeah, I think just before we get Keith's memory of that night, for me, that was one of the nicest things of the evening, is that if you're in that clubhouse every day, you understood how close that team was. But to really see it play out the way it did, even Dom Smith, that was the night that he basically went out past second base on the scooter. You got a real sense, and it continued after that. I think that was really, I think the Mets fan base had slowly started falling in love with a lot of these guys, but that was the night that it really came together for them.
I think it's pretty much similar to '84, where it took, the Mets had been down for so long, and we played very well in the first half of that season and got into August. And once after the All-Star break, the fans started coming out, and I think we had the same kind of situation last year. I always like doing it from a different position in the field, because it reminds me when I was a kid at a ballpark, and when have I been out in the bleachers? Ages, but they're doing a game. What's odd is we're looking into we have to rely more on the monitor because our view is different. And then my pattern is I want to see the pitch and then the swing, and I know it's contact. And then I look to the field and I'm looking at a different angle. I'm used to looking and then looking down, and here we are. And here comes Frasier's home run. And it was a high fly ball. And what strikes me is that I've got it in sight, and it's like it's there. And I hate to say it, the exit velo. You don't realize when the ball's crushed like that how fast it's going. And it was a great angle looking over my right shoulder, and it was up high, and it was weather. In our view, we didn't have the angle for the foul pole, and but I had a sense that it was going to stay fair, and that certainly was electric. And then we're out on the field, and we really get a sense of the fans and the energy and the cheering that we miss up there in the booth.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's face it. It's Gary's nightmare. It's our night. It's our night to eat. That's what it is. Gary's nightmare, our night to eat.
But the thing about it is, normally when we go out and do those games, especially later in the season, we're focused more on the being in the stands part and interacting with the fans and eating the food. But the game was so important, we had to concentrate on the game that night. So it kind of took away from all the other aspects of being out there. But I do agree with Keith. The explosion of energy out there was really palpable in a way that we don't experience it when we're in our normal location.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know, because listen, people who haven't put on those headsets before don't understand how much they can really drown things out, but I would assume that you can't drown that out. Listen, I've told this story. I think I told it on one of these Facebook Lives that night, they're down 3 runs, and I'm basically waiting to just go to the press conference area. I'm not down behind home plate just yet, waiting to do a walk-off interview. And as soon as Frasier hits that home run, I have to really scamper on down. And the place was so electric and crazed that I had someone that actually got flung into me as I was walking down. My phone flew out of my hand. Someone jumped on top of the phone, not knowing. I mean, it was to be in the middle of that for a regular season game in August. I don't think people who were not there quite understand just how nuts that place was. I mean, they had won their 7th in a row. They were, after that win, just a half game out of the playoffs out of nowhere. It was as close to anything we saw in 2015, even through the playoffs.
Now imagine that game, a similar circumstance, everything this exact same without a fan in the ballpark.
Yeah.
No, it just
without them,
it would just be like a.
They'd have to rip off their own jerseys. They can't celebrate like that either,
No, yeah, exactly.
Gary, would you be hard pressed to make a call of a game that important a hit?
Think about it. Think about it, Keith. I mean, it's not, in terms of the sound of the ballpark, it's not that much different from a player hitting a big home run on the road. Often get a fairly silent ballpark after a big home run. I mean, I'm thinking about the Mets-Nats series in September of 15, like when Neuenhuis hit the home run and when Cespedes hit the home run, and it was dead silent there. So I think it's not so much the big moments. I think the harder part about broadcasting in an empty ballpark are the quiet moments, because you're almost, first of all, players are going to be able to hear us, so that is going to make you a little self-conscious. Second of all, every time you stop speaking, it's dead silence, which makes you uncomfortable. So those are the things I think that we're going to have to get past. The big plays are still the big plays, and I don't think that the lack of a crowd is going to really change that. I think it's going to be the rest of the game that's going to be really hard for us.
I think I recommend close the windows and Keith puts one of his albums on.
No, how do you guys feel about piping and crowd noise? Because I know that's been a big issue, with some of the events that have come back. Do you put a low hum of crowd noise underneath the broadcast? Is that somehow not kosher? I happen to think that it's a good idea, just because I think it'll make everybody listening to the game at home a little more comfortable. What do you guys think?
I'm 100%. Sorry, Keith. Behind a little crowd noise, not only for the fans at home, but I think also for us in the booth to stay on our mark. I've been thinking about my own scorecard of making sure I write something maybe in bold type at the top, keep the energy up or something, because I tend, myself personally, not talking about anyone else, I can be very quiet and quiet speaking, and that certainly is not what you need in a ball game. So.
And of course, there's every chance that for the road games, we're going to be broadcasting from a remote location, which, that's something that has been done more and more over the last few years. And we've watched ESPN do it with the Korean
KBO.
Baseball games. But I've never experienced that. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm going to be fascinated to see how easy, difficult, different it's going to be doing a game from a remote location.
Well, I've never had that experience. It's almost like going back to the old days. I know in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when I played in Tulsa, the radio guy wouldn't go on the road with us, and he did the games from Tulsa, and he had like typical all the different sounds he can make. Like the old. That's what it makes me think of. But I'm all for the hum of the as if their fans were there. What I don't want is like it becoming, if they try too hard, it's like watching a very bad sitcom and having laugh tracks. Don't want to have that.
Yeah, I don't think you want it to swell when somebody hits a home run. I think you just need it in the background.
Like ambiance. Yeah, a little ambiance.
Couple of decibels.
I think the one thing we are lucky is our producer, Greg Picker, has done remote games before. Has done games like this. So I think he's going to really be as he is with every game, he's going to be our sounding board for this.
Since 2016, for each Mets home run at Citi Field, Citi has donated to No Kid Hungry, with more children facing hunger due to the coronavirus. Citi and the Citi Foundation have continued to support No Kid Hungry, providing $7 million in support since March. Join Citi in the fight against childhood hunger. Donate at www.nokidhungry.org/Citi. Guys, fan questions. Wrap it up here with some fan questions.
Sure.
Miggs Gary Cohen asks the question: is it acceptable to leave a ball game early?
No. But you won't have to have that problem this year because you won't be going to any ball games. So you can worry about that next year. No, I left. I'll tell you a story. I only one time growing up did I ever leave a Major League Baseball game early. It was actually the Willie Mays night in 1973, and my mom took me to the game. And there was a rain delay in like the 7th inning, and the rain delay went on for maybe an hour, and we left. And they started the game again and finished it. And I don't even think anybody scored. I think the score remained exactly the same. But I was heartbroken, and I just was beside myself. And I never ever did that again, and neither should you.
Keith, Ron, this is for both of you. This is from Steve. Gary Carter is my hero. Do you guys have any great stories that you could share about him?
Oh gosh, a lot. I mean, we played together. Was he 4 years or 3 years? This last year was the last year of '89. We both left.
Yeah,
it was our last year. Okay, so
85 to.
I always remember Gary as running on and off the field with the knees. There's no greater respect and admiration for him doing that, and with the knees the way they were, icing like Buckner iced his ankles and knees before the game. Kid did the same thing, and no matter if he was in a bad slump or in a red hot streak, he was able to separate offense from defense. Never affected him behind the plate, his play calling, and he just, the catcher has the smallest distance to run to the dugout, but I don't care. Okay, he ran on and off that field every inning, and that it doesn't take much to do it. And it's a bad optic when you got players that get to the foul line and then walk into the dugout. It's a bad optic. Run out to your position, run back. It doesn't take that much. You don't have to sprint. I mean, kid would run like Pete Rose ran to first base. That's how. And I was just very admirable. Nothing but respect for Gary.
Yeah. He was an amazing guy, an amazing leader. One of the things I got out of all those games in the postseason '86, I ended up watching them all, the NLCS and the World Series. How nimble kid was. I mean, I don't know if you people know at home how big he was. I mean, this guy was like a chimney. He was every bit of 6'2" and 225, 230, 235, Keith. I mean, he was as tall as he was wide. He was just so strong, but you really saw how nimble he was for a big man. That's why he was a Gold Glove catcher. And I don't have a lot of memorabilia, but the one picture I keep in my office in Connecticut is a picture in 1988. The Mets were able to win the National League East, and I was lucky enough to pitch that game. And when the game was over and we got the 27th out, kid is hugging me on the mound. It's only he and I. And I think George, the great photographer from Madison Square Garden, he took the picture. But it's just he and I. And the relationship between a pitcher and catcher is one of the greatest relationships in baseball. And I love that picture.
Here's one of my favorite pictures. Right?
Nice.
That's after Game 7, and we were world champs. And
Wow.
I think that captures it all. That is one of my favorite. It's right up it's framed and it's there.
That's beautiful.
That's nice.
Not to go too late here, but one of the things that stood out to me about the '86 watch party a couple of weeks ago was how much, especially towards the end, you guys kind of unprompted, everybody was just talking about Kid and talking about Gary Carter. And I'm sure that it was, it's always, I'm sure, a bit strange for you guys to have him not be there during those types of reunions.
He was such a big part of that team. Gary was just he was an amazing human being. If you know his whole story, he had to be kind of a parent at a young age. And I think that's probably, he lost his mom. And I think that's probably why he was so mature at such a young age and was such a star at such a young age, because he had that maturity. I mean, at some point, think about it. We had arguably the best catcher in the game behind the plate, the best right fielder in the game, the best first baseman, the best pitcher, and Dwight Gooden. That's what that team had. Think about it. Pretty crazy.
Well, what Gary brought too was, he brought more than what he brought on the field. He brought another personality that had an indomitable will, a driving force, another guy that cared and was into the game and you had myself very expressive on the field. And I think that's infectious. I just don't think you can have enough of those kind of players.
I'll real quickly, Kid, when I didn't know this, but Kid would get mad at you occasionally when you'd go 2-0 on a hitter. And I spent probably the first 2 years of my career 2-0 on everyone. But he used to do this when he first came over in '85, and I didn't know he did it. You'd go 2-0 on a hitter in a big circumstance, like seventh inning, the leadoff hitter. You got to get this out, got to get the leadoff guy. He would fire a strike back to you that was 90 plus, and you'd be like, what? Like, really? And but it always woke you up, and it was like, you know what? He cares about what I'm doing as much as I care. And boy, that means a lot.
You guys talk about his indomitable spirit. I was shocked toward the end of his career. He left the Mets same time that Keith did after the '89 season. And he wound up playing 4 more years after that. He played till he was 38 years old. And when you think about how bad his knees were and how much care they took day in and day out, I thought when his Mets career was over that he was basically done. I was shocked that he was able to go on and be a fairly productive major league catcher for that much longer to that kind of age with those knees and the condition they were. But it tells you how much he loved the game and how how hard he was willing to work to fight through the pain.
You don't get to nickname the kid for nothing. He wanted to be that kid forever.
All right, guys. I think that's the best place to leave it for this week. So that is another edition of Beyond the Booth Live. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for tuning in. As always, for Gary, Keith, Ron, I'm Steve. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see you next week.